What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA show. And we are nearly at UFC 309, where we're going to see Jon Jones make his return to heavyweight to defend the title against Stipe Miocic. I believe at this point, a lot of you guys are not so excited about this fight. That's what seems to be constantly talked about everywhere, is that people feel that Jon Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall. This whole narrative is going on. I feel like I'm one of the very few voices on YouTube. Granted, we don't have a huge audience, but I'm trying to be the voice of reason here. I feel like I'm the only person saying that this fight is something that we should be grateful for, that is pretty awesome. And maybe some of you guys would like to see Jon Jones take on Tom Aspinall. Is just not happening. So we're going to talk about that today. First of all, we're going to share this video because this is what I feel like is happening. This is who I feel like I've become.
People want is more. Leave her alone. You're lucky she even performed for you bastards. Leave Brittany alone.
And this is literally what it's feeling like at this point. I'm just saying over and over, yo, cut the guy some slack. He's done enough to earn our respect. Let him have this fight, even if it isn't the fight that a lot of people want to see. It is what it is. And by the way, it's not just him that's choosing everything. He's not the king of the UFC. The UFC wanted to put this fight on. Jon Jones made the call out. They liked it. They put it on. They scheduled it. There was an injury. It was delayed. Tom Aspinall won the interim title in between. Even if you're unhappy with the fight, I feel like you should stop blaming Jon Jones. We're going to talk more about that in a second. But now we're going to go on to from Ariel Helwani's channel, a few different journalists talking about the whole situation. And namely this guy, Shaheen Al-Shatti. I've seen a lot of his stuff before. He goes off on Jon Jones, and we're going to play this, and I'm going to respond to this right now. So here we go. Boom. And let's take a listen.
This has been 2 years of this, basically. This has at least been one very strong year of this, where it's been very clear that Jon, at all fronts, is taking any opportunity he can to use it as an excuse to not fight Tom Aspinall. It's not shocking in the least bit, and frankly, like, this is ridiculous. What are we doing? This is like, man, I'm gonna caveat all this with, like, yeah, Jon is a legend. He's one of the greatest fighters of all time. He's either the GOAT or second place in the GOAT list, depending on how you view all the PED suspensions and obvious, clear, like, drug testing problems that he's had throughout his career. You know, like, we're not here to litigate that. Not taking anything away from what this man's done, not taking anything away from this man's run at light heavyweight, which was astounding. But this isn't the real heavyweight champion. Like, it's very clear at this point that this man is not the real UFC heavyweight champion. Tom Aspinall is the real UFC heavyweight champion because Tom Aspinall is the one fighting.
I'm just going to pause here, and I'm going to let him continue in a second. But it's just like, now what are we doing? We're just making stuff up that you're choosing that Tom Aspinall is now the title, and we, the people, now decide who's the title holder because of how frequently they're fighting. That's not how it works. How it works is the UFC makes these decisions. The UFC has decided to keep the belt with Jon Jones during the layoff, not the layoff, but during the injury recovery. And they decided to keep this fight intact for the belt. You know, it's funny because I feel like if the circumstances were different and there wasn't such an outcry, and by the way, there's an elephant in the room that these guys aren't talking about, which is the reason why sentiment is like this, is because of YouTube MMA. I think really it's because of people like MMA Guru and other YouTubers that these guys will never talk about, but it's becoming such a strong movement and such a big source for people to get their MMA news and opinions. And I think this is what's turned the entire audience and the crowd of mixed martial arts against Jon Jones. I think in the past we'd see these other types of legacy fights, let's say Khabib versus GSP, or even you could even argue Conor coming back to take on Khabib after that layoff, after going into boxing and whatnot. There are probably other more active fighters, more deserving fighters. Nobody cried then, at least not that I remember. People were just stoked and excited, and it was a fun fight. It was an exciting fight. I think this is the same. So look, if you really want to have that much of an outcry, fine. But why are people taking out on Jon Jones? I do not understand. If this was really such a terrible fight, then the UFC would force his hand, or they'd strip him of the title. And they haven't. So the UFC is also aligned. And the last thing I want to say is, people get so upset all the time. Why did they make the London card at the US time? It's hard for the fighters. The UFC shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have done this. At the end of the day, I don't claim to be able to run the UFC better than the UFC, and neither should you. I know you're in the sport and you're a journalist, but they've been running the business. They have their reasons. They probably have a reason why they want this fight. I think I know what it is. They want Jon Jones to have this fight for legacy purposes, and I don't think they want him to fight Tom Aspinall as much as you might want it, or I might want it, or anybody else might want it. They don't want it. They have their reasons. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that are making this sport awesome and making this sport the biggest sport on the planet and making the organization bigger and better. And I know people want to get on them all the time, but at the end of the day, the reason why fighter pay is as high as it is right now is because of the UFC and what they've done and the progress they've made by pushing the sport. So let's just let them do their job to some extent. Stop complaining so much and maybe be grateful for once that we get to see Jon Jones fight again. I mean, that in and of itself is amazing. The last time he fought against Cyril Gane, I was jumping out of my seat. I was so excited. So be a little appreciative. You don't have to be so negative. All right, let's keep listening to this guy.
In heavyweights, Tom Aspinall is the one fighting people who are relevant. Tom Aspinall is not sitting here waiting to drag a retired firefighter off the couch.
How is Cyril Gane not relevant? At the time, he was the last guy to face Francis Ngannou. He nearly beat Francis Ngannou. Cyril Gane is a very, very dangerous fighter. He's defeated many great heavyweights. He's incredible. So yeah, you're everybody's jumping down Jon Jones. By the way, Stipe could win this fight. People are acting like it's a foregone conclusion. Stipe could definitely win this fight. We haven't really seen him. 42, or as old as he is, he's not that old. Glover Teixeira won the belt at 42. Everybody wears that age and the damage differently. So I just think all of this is just I don't even know. Okay, let's keep listening.
Hasn't won a fight since like 2020. Like this fight is a pure vanity fight at this point. And
okay, he hasn't won people love to say he hasn't won. He lost one fight after that. He beat Daniel Cormier twice, 2 times in a row. One of the greatest MMA fighters of history. I mean, he's a 2-time. I mean, this is what just randomly. Oh, he just hasn't won since 2020. Those were big victories back to back. And yeah, he lost to Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou looked incredible. He dominated. I mean, I think Francis Ngannou would and has smashed most people in the heavyweight division. And then he hasn't had a fight since. He's taken a few-year layoff, but he's still the greatest heavyweight in the history of the UFC with the most title defenses at heavyweight. So it's not like some random guy coming off the couch. Again, I feel like everybody's mind has been warped from all this negativity that has been brought down through the MMA YouTube community. I really do think it's shifted people's perspective in a non-logical way. And at a minimum, all I'll say is, if you are so upset at the fight, stop blaming it on Jon Jones. Obviously, he's going to do what's in his best interest. This fight is for legacy. Maybe it's a less difficult fight than taking Tom Aspinall. So be it. Like you hear fighters say all the time, at the end of the day, the objective of this game is to make the most money for the least risk. And like, yeah, we love to see people like Dricus take on great challenges. I mean, it is amazing. But at the end of the day, has Jon Jones not earned this fight? And by the way, this is not an easy fight. I'm saying maybe it might be an easier fight than Tom Aspinall, although we don't really know. We're speculating. The matchup might be quite a tricky matchup for him. And Stipe might come out and look incredible. We don't know. So I don't think we should be jumping to any of these harsh conclusions. But anyways, let's keep going.
Now, even this lessening of the stakes even further of like, well, no, there's clearly no way I'm going to fight Tom, who holds the interim title, who again really kind of holds the real title. And I think a lot of people consider either the number 1 or number 2 heavyweight in the world, depending on where you view Francis. This is just ridiculous, man.
It's not so ridiculous. Now, I will agree with you on one small point. I will agree with you that if Jon Jones wins and decides to have one more fight and decides to fight again at heavyweight and then bypasses Aspinall for Alex Pereira, okay, then I'll give it to you. Then you got a point, because that would be, but I don't think that's going to happen. The UFC won't allow that to happen. What I think is going to happen is Jon Jones is going to win and he's going to retire. Or maybe he goes down to, I doubt it. Maybe he goes down back to light heavyweight and challenges Pereira. But if he stays at heavyweight, yeah, then you've got a point, because Tom Aspinall is the interim title holder and he's already had a successful title defense. So that's got to happen at that point. But I don't think that's going to happen. Not because of Jon, by the way. It may be partially because of Jon. I actually think the UFC does not want that fight. I don't think that the UFC wants Jon Jones to go out on a loss. And a lot of times they do want their fighters to go on a loss. Here, I don't think they do, because I think it all goes back to Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou leaving, and they want to be able to have Jon Jones come out victorious and then retire as the GOAT of the sport. So that the GOAT of the sport was within the UFC for the entirety of his career from start to finish. Boom. I do think that's part of the puzzle that these guys aren't mentioning. But anyways, all right, let's keep going.
This is very typical but this is ridiculous. We see it's very easy to see what John is doing here. No, I'm not surprised by this. I'm not surprised in the least bit. And again, this Vanity fight next week, it doesn't really mean anything. This is the exact same thing of a George St. Pierre, Michael Bisping situation. No one, when George came in and won the title, no one was saying, "Oh, George is the best George is the best middleweight in the world." John's not the best heavyweight in the world. We know that. And the fact that he's refusing to fight people who have a claim to be the best heavyweight in the world and having won his title basically not beating the best heavyweight in the world already, like there is no world in which that I will view this as like a legitimate heavyweight title fight next week when this goes down. It's just ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. We're gonna sit here.
So ridiculous, just complaining and complaining and complaining. I mean, look, we get to have a legacy fight of two all-time champions. If it bothers you that much, fine. Then we can say maybe Tom Aspinall is superior to both of them as a fighter. But so what? This is it's the UFC once again that's carrying through with this fight that was already scheduled, that was already on the books, that we should be excited about, that we were excited about until Tom Aspinall then stepped in on short notice, won the belt in spectacular fashion, which was amazing. And by the way, I'm a huge Tom Aspinall fan, so don't get it twisted. I love Tom Aspinall, but I want to show you guys something else, okay? So this guy's going off on a tangent and so upset and so dismayed. I mean, at the end of the day, we're getting an incredible fight. I think a pretty dope fight card too. I mean, the co-main is awesome. I can't wait to see Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira, but just the amount of complaining for this entertainment and for this sport that's being brought into our homes from this organization that should be a pleasure and something to enjoy. This guy's just, I just don't get like this negative attitude. It's insane. All right. But now I want to show you another clip. So this guy's going off and so upset, but nobody's thought to think, hey, what does Tom Aspinall think? Okay. Let's see what Tom Aspinall says in his own words.
Obviously, you're the backup fighter for Jones and Stipe, but do you actually believe that if one of them pulls out, you will get the opportunity to fight them?
I like to think I would. I'm like ever the optimist with most things, but realistically, I don't think it's going to happen. But I am ready. Okay, like the fights at this point, it's like less than 2 weeks away. I'm ready to go. Like if they want me to jump in, I can definitely jump in now. I'm in good shape. I've been preparing for it. Obviously, it's difficult because I've not been preparing for one guy, but I am fit. I am ready to go. So if they need me, I will jump in, yeah.
Because DC came out recently saying that you got to be crazy to believe that John or Stipe would fight you under those circumstances. What do you make to that?
I think he's probably right. Like I say, I'm like ever the optimist. I'm always like thinking positive about stuff, but I don't really think it's going to happen. I think those guys are, you know, at this point, they've probably earned the right to say no, and like that's okay. But I'll be ready. They told me to be ready, so I'm just following the UFC orders. They said, be ready November 16th. So I will be ready November 16th. That's all I can do.
So you heard that from Tom Aspinall himself. He says, yeah, it's probably not going to happen, but at this point, they've probably earned it. That is a fighter right there. And this is the perspective that we should really be listening to. Now, I know there are some fighters that do feel that, I mean, Michael Bisping is one in particular, but he's quite biased because he's in, you know, no fault of his, but he's very close with Tom Aspinall. I get it. He's pushing for his guy. He wants his guy to get that fight. And that would be huge for Tom Aspinall's legacy to be the first guy that really beats Jon Jones without a disqualification or anything bizarre like that. Or some weird drug test or something along those lines. So that, I mean, of course, that'd be huge for Tom Aspinall, but even Tom recognizes, look, the body of work that these two guys have completed and executed on, they should be able to say no. And I mean, really, John hasn't said no. He's just following through. He said that in the interview, but he hasn't really said no. He's just following through with the fight and the schedule that the UFC has set up. Now, afterwards, we'll see what happens. Do I think Jon Jones after this fight will take on Tom Aspinall? No, I think he will end up retiring. And I don't think that is, again, just him. I think the UFC wants him to retire essentially undefeated. And so I think that's what's going to happen. But the last thing I'll say is, fine. I know Shaheen says later in the episode, well, if they want to have this fight, they should just have this fight. That's great. But John should vacate the belt. That's what he should do. Vacate the belt and then have all the fun fights you want. It's like, is that a realistic thing? If the shoes were switched, would you just be like, yeah, I'll just vacate the belt, knowing that you're going to give up pay-per-view points, you're going to give up all this money? And at the end of the day, again, it's up to the UFC. fighters, I mean, it has happened where fighters voluntarily vacated the belt, although I think they were probably pressured to do so. Because why would you do it? You have so much upside when you're champion, so much more exposure. You make so much more money just because of the way the contracts are structured. So, oh yeah, just give up the belt. Like this is not their livelihood, and they're not trying to. I mean, might be his last fight, so he's not trying to make as much money as possible before he retires. Come on, just be reasonable, be logical, and just enjoy it. This is going to be a really, really fun fight. People are ruining it. And so I just let it be. Leave Jon Jones alone. That's all I got to say. I sound like a broken record at this point, but seriously, leave Jon Jones alone. Okay. Thank you guys so much. If you like this video, make sure to click that like button. If you want to see more from the 10-7 MMA channel, make sure to click subscribe. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.